I never thought I'd be the woman telling this story. At 63 years old, married for 38 years, with 3 grown children and 5 grandchildren, I was supposed to have my life figured out. I was supposed to be the wise grandmother, the stable wife, the woman who had weathered every storm and come out stronger. But here I am, sitting in a hotel room in Portland, Oregon, my hands shaking as I try to make sense of what I've done. And the worst part? I'm not sure I regret it. Not entirely. Not yet. My name is Eleanor, and this is the story of how I betrayed everything I thought I believed in, and how a single moment of connection with a stranger made me question whether the life I've been living for nearly 4 decades is actually mine, or just a performance I've been putting on for everyone else. Before you judge me, before you close this video and write me off as just another cheating wife, I need you to understand something. This isn't about sex. This isn't about some midlife crisis or boredom or wanting to feel young again. This is about something far more terrifying. It's about realizing that you've been asleep for so long that when someone finally wakes you up, you don't even recognize yourself anymore. It started 6 months ago, in the most ordinary way possible. My husband Richard and I live in a comfortable suburban home in Sacramento. Richard is a retired accountant, methodical and predictable in the way that used to make me feel safe. Our marriage isn't bad. That's what makes this so complicated. If Richard was abusive or cruel or neglectful, maybe this would be easier to explain. But he's none of those things. He's just there. Like a piece of furniture I've grown so accustomed to that I stopped really seeing it years ago. We have our routines, breakfast at 7, walks in the evening, weekend visits with the kids, game nights with friends from church. It's all very nice, very respectable, very dead. If you're still watching, please hit that subscribe button. I need to know I'm not alone in this, that someone out there understands what it feels like to wake up one day and realize you've been living someone else's life. The man's name is Marcus. I met him at a grief support group, of all places. My mother had passed away 4 months earlier, and I was struggling in ways I couldn't articulate to Richard or my children. They expected me to grieve properly, respectfully, to cry at appropriate times and then move on. But my grief felt wild and chaotic, like something alive inside me that refused to be contained. So I found this group that met Tuesday evenings in the basement of a community center in Midtown. Marcus was there because his wife had died 2 years ago from breast cancer. He was 61, with silver hair and these eyes that looked like they'd seen too much but refused to look away. The first night, we didn't even speak. But I watched him during the sharing circle. The way he talked about loss not as something to overcome, but as something that transforms you into someone entirely new. He said his wife's death had cracked him open, and that he was still trying to figure out what to do with all the rawness inside. I felt something shift in my chest when he said that, like a door I didn't know existed had suddenly opened an inch. After the 3rd meeting, we ended up at a diner down the street with a few other people from the group. The others left one by one until it was just Marcus and me, sitting in a booth with cold coffee between us, talking about everything except grief. He told me about his work as a photographer, how he'd spent the last year traveling to national parks, trying to capture something he couldn't quite name. I told him about my life, my marriage, my children, and as the words came out, I heard how hollow they sounded, like I was describing someone else's existence. "Are you happy?" he asked me at one point, and the question was so direct, so unexpected, that I actually laughed. "What kind of question is that?" "An honest one," he said, holding my gaze. "Because you sound like someone reciting a resume, not describing a life." I should have been offended. I should have made an excuse and left. Instead, I started crying right there in that diner booth. Tears I'd been holding back for months, maybe years. Marcus didn't try to comfort me or fix it. He just sat there, present. And somehow that was exactly what I needed. Subscribe to the channel if this resonates with you. Let me know in the comments if you've ever felt like you're living a life that doesn't quite fit anymore. That night started something between us that I still don't fully understand. We began meeting for coffee, then for walks, then for longer conversations that stretched into evenings. I told Richard I'd made a friend from the grief group, which wasn't technically a lie. But it also wasn't the truth. Because what was growing between Marcus and me felt dangerous in a way I couldn't name. It wasn't sexual attraction, at least not at first. It was more like recognition, like finding someone who spoke a language I'd forgotten I knew. Marcus had this way of asking questions that peeled back layers I didn't know I had. He wanted to know what I thought about things, what I dreamed about, what scared me. Not the safe, acceptable answers I'd been giving for 38 years, but the real, messy, complicated truth underneath. And the more time I spent with him, the more I realized how long it had been since anyone had been curious about who I actually was beneath the roles I played. Richard never asked those kinds of questions. Our conversations revolved around logistics: what time the grandkids were coming over, whether we needed to call the plumber, what he wanted for dinner. Sometime over the decades, we'd stopped being partners and started being roommates. Polite, considerate roommates who shared a bed and a last name, but not much else. 3 months into knowing Marcus, something shifted. We were sitting in his car after a particularly heavy group session, parked outside the community center. The rain was coming down hard, creating this cocoon of sound around us. He reached over and took my hand, and the touch sent electricity through my entire body. Not because it was sexual, but because it was intimate in a way I'd forgotten existed. He looked at me and said, "Eleanor, I think I'm falling in love with you." My first instinct was to pull away, to remind him I was married, to list all the reasons this was impossible. But instead, I heard myself whisper, "I know, me too." If you're hooked on this story, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Your support means everything. What happened next is where it gets complicated, where I became the woman I never thought I'd be. We didn't rush into anything physical. In some ways, that made it worse, because every conversation, every shared moment, every text message felt like a betrayal. The emotional affair, they call it. As if putting a name on it makes it less devastating. Marcus and I would meet 2 or 3 times a week, always in public places, always careful. Coffee shops in neighborhoods where no one knew me, bookstores in different towns. Once, we drove 2 hours to the coast just to walk on the beach and talk. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years, maybe decades. With Marcus, I wasn't Richard's wife or my children's mother or the grandmother who baked cookies and remembered birthdays. I was just Eleanor, whoever she was. And discovering that person felt like both the most selfish and the most necessary thing I'd ever done. The guilt was crushing. I'd wake up next to Richard every morning and feel like I was living a lie. But the thought of giving up what I had with Marcus felt like agreeing to go back to sleep, to bury that newly awakened part of myself again. I was caught between 2 impossible choices: hurt everyone around me or lose myself completely. 4 months into this emotional entanglement, everything changed. Marcus and I were at a gallery opening in San Francisco, looking at black and white photographs of abandoned places. He'd driven us down for the day, and being away from Sacramento felt like permission to exist in this alternate reality where we could be together without consequences. We were standing in front of this image of an empty house, half reclaimed by forest, and Marcus said, "That's how I felt before I met you, like an abandoned place waiting to be found." I turned to look at him, and something in his expression broke down the last wall I'd been maintaining. "Marcus, this can't keep going like this," I said. "I'm drowning in guilt, but I can't give you up. I don't know what to do." He pulled me into a quiet corner of the gallery, and for the first time, he kissed me. It wasn't a long kiss, maybe 5 seconds, but it changed everything. Because now there was no ambiguity. No gray area where I could pretend this was just friendship. I had crossed a line and there was no going back. Make sure you're subscribed because what happens next is going to shake you as much as it shook me. That night, I drove home in a daze. Richard was already in bed reading when I got there, and he barely looked up when I came in. "How was your day?" he asked. The same way he asked every night, not really expecting or wanting a detailed answer. And I realized with painful clarity that he had no idea who I was anymore. He'd stopped looking years ago, content with the version of me that cooked his meals and kept his house and showed up for family photos. The real me, the me that Marcus had awakened, was invisible to him. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay next to my husband of 38 years and felt like a stranger in my own life. By morning, I'd made a decision. I needed to tell Richard something. Not everything, maybe, but something. Because the weight of the secret was crushing me, and I couldn't carry it alone anymore. I waited until after breakfast, until Richard had settled into his favorite chair with his crossword puzzle. "We need to talk," I said, and something in my tone made him actually put the puzzle down and look at me. "What's wrong?" he asked, and I could see the first flicker of concern in his eyes. Maybe even fear. "I've met someone," I said, and watched his face go pale. "It's not what you think, or maybe it is. I don't even know anymore. But I need you to understand that I'm drowning here, Richard. I've been drowning for years, and you haven't noticed." What followed was the most honest conversation we'd had in decades, and it was brutal. Richard admitted he'd felt me pulling away, but had assumed it was grief over my mother. He said he'd thought giving me space was what I needed. I told him that space wasn't the same as distance, that I needed connection, curiosity, passion, things we'd let die in our marriage long ago. He cried, which shocked me. I don't think I'd seen Richard cry more than twice in our entire marriage. "Is it physical?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Have you slept with him?" "No," I said, and that was true. But I could see in his eyes that he knew the emotional betrayal was almost worse. That I'd been sharing parts of myself with another man, that I'd locked away from him for years. Hit subscribe if you're still with me. I need to know you're here for the rest of this story, because it's about to get even more complicated. Richard begged me to end it with Marcus. He said we could go to counseling, that we could fix our marriage, that 38 years was too much to throw away. And he was right. About all of it. But here's what I couldn't make him understand. Fixing our marriage meant going back to who I was before Marcus, and I couldn't do it. I didn't know if I'd survive going back to sleep again. I agreed to think about it. I told Richard I needed a few days to clear my head, and I checked into a hotel. That's where I am now, in this bland room in Portland, 3 hours north of my real life, trying to figure out who I am and what I want. I've been here for 4 days, and I've talked to Marcus once and Richard twice. Both of them want an answer. Both of them want me to choose. But here's the thing, nobody tells you about these situations. There is no good choice. If I choose Richard, I honor my vows and my family and the life I've built. But I betray this new part of myself that feels more alive than I've been in years. If I choose Marcus, I blow up my entire life, hurt people I love, and chase something that might just be an illusion born of loneliness and grief. And if I choose neither, I'm alone at 63, starting over from nothing, which terrifies me more than I can say. Last night, I got a text from my daughter Emma. Someone had told her I wasn't home, that Richard and I were having problems. "Mom, what's going on?" she wrote. "Dad won't tell me anything, but I know something's wrong." I haven't responded yet because I don't know what to say. How do I explain to my children that their mother, the woman they thought they knew, has been hiding someone else inside her all along? This morning, Marcus called. "Eleanor, I know this is hard," he said, "and I don't want to pressure you, but I need you to know that I'm not going anywhere. Whatever you decide, I'm here." The kindness in his voice almost broke me, because Richard has never said anything like that. Richard's love feels like obligation, like a contract we both signed so long ago we forgot we had a choice. Subscribe to this channel if you want to know what I decide. Drop a comment telling me what you would do because I honestly don't know anymore. But there's more. Something I haven't told Marcus or Richard. Something that makes this whole situation even more impossible. 3 days ago, I got a call from my doctor. The mammogram I had 2 months ago showed some abnormalities, and they want me to come in for a biopsy. It might be nothing. It might be something. But suddenly I'm faced with my own mortality in a way I wasn't before. And it's changing everything. If I'm sick, really sick, how do I want to spend whatever time I have left? Do I want to spend it trying to resurrect a marriage that's been dying for years out of obligation? Or do I want to spend it feeling alive? Even if that means hurting people. Even if it makes me selfish. And is it more selfish to stay in a marriage where both people are just going through the motions, or to leave and give both of us a chance at something real? I haven't told anyone about the doctor's call. Not Richard, not Marcus, not my children. Maybe I'm waiting to see what the biopsy shows before I make any decisions. Or maybe I'm just a coward who's using this as an excuse to delay the inevitable choice. Yesterday, I drove out to the coast by myself. I stood on the beach watching the waves crash against the rocks, and I thought about all the versions of Eleanor I've been in my life. The daughter, the student, the young bride, the mother, the grandmother. Each role felt like a costume I put on and forgot to take off. And now, at 63, I finally met someone who made me want to take all the costumes off and see what was underneath. But what if there's nothing there? What if the real Eleanor is just as empty as the abandoned house in that photograph? I thought about my mother, who stayed in a loveless marriage for 52 years because that's what women of her generation did. She died without ever really living for herself, and I remember thinking at her funeral that I would never let that happen to me. But here I am, almost the same age she was when I had that thought, and I've done exactly what she did. I've made myself small and acceptable and convenient for everyone around me. Make sure you're subscribed because I'm about to tell you something I've never admitted to anyone. The truth is, I'm angry. Furiously, devastatingly angry. At Richard, for being content with a marriage that was slowly suffocating me. At myself, for allowing it to happen. For not speaking up decades ago when there might have been time to fix it. At my children, for expecting me to always be the stable, predictable mother who never has her own needs or desires. At society, for teaching me that a good woman is one who sacrifices everything for everyone else and calls it love. Marcus didn't create this anger, he just gave me permission to feel it. And now I don't know how to put it back in the box where I've kept it locked for so long. I called Richard this morning. I need more time, I told him. He was quiet for a long moment before he said, Eleanor, I've been thinking, and I realize I stopped really seeing you somewhere along the way. I stopped trying. I'm sorry for that. His apology was genuine. I could hear it in his voice. But it also felt like too little, too late. Because where was this awareness 5 years ago? 10 years ago? Before I had to meet someone else to remember what it felt like to be seen? I know you're sorry, I said, but I don't know if sorry is enough to fix what's broken between us. What do you want from me? He asked, and I heard the frustration creeping into his tone. I'm trying here, Eleanor. I'm willing to go to counseling to work on this, but I need you to meet me halfway. And that's the problem, isn't it? I don't know if I can meet him halfway because I don't know if I want to. The thought of going back to that house, to that life, to those routines, makes me feel like I can't breathe. But the thought of leaving, of being the woman who destroys her family at 63 for a man she's known for 6 months, makes me feel like a monster. Then there's Marcus, who texted me this afternoon with a photo of a sunset. Thinking of you, the message said. So simple, so present. Richard wouldn't send me a text like that. Richard barely uses his phone except for practical things. And I know it's not fair to compare them. That I'm comparing Marcus at his best with Richard at his worst. But I can't help it. Please subscribe and tell me in the comments. Am I being selfish? Am I having a breakdown? Or am I finally waking up to what I've been missing? Here's what nobody tells you about these situations. Everyone has an opinion, but none of them have to live with the consequences of your choice. My sister thinks I'm being ridiculous, throwing away a good marriage for some fantasy. My best friend says life is short and I should follow my heart. My therapist, who I've started seeing twice a week, says I need to figure out what I want independent of both men. But that's easier said than done when you've spent your entire adult life defining yourself in relation to other people. The biopsy is scheduled for next week. I'll go back to Sacramento for it, face Richard and my children, and probably a lot of uncomfortable questions. Part of me wonders if I should wait for the results before making any decisions about my marriage. If it's cancer, maybe that changes everything. Maybe it makes the choice clear. Or maybe it just makes everything more complicated. Last night, I had a dream that I was standing at a fork in the road. One path led back to my house in Sacramento, where Richard was waiting on the porch. The other path led into a forest where Marcus was standing at the edge, holding out his hand. But in the dream, I didn't take either path. I just stood there at the fork, paralyzed, while the ground beneath me started to crack and crumble. I woke up in a panic, my heart racing, and I realized that doing nothing is also a choice. That staying in this limbo is its own kind of betrayal. This morning, I made a list of all the reasons to stay with Richard and all the reasons to leave. The stay list was longer: 38 years of history, 3 children, 5 grandchildren, financial security, social stability, shared memories, the comfort of the familiar. The leave list was shorter but somehow heavier: feeling alive, being seen, emotional intimacy, passion, authenticity, the chance to be myself before it's too late. I showed the list to my therapist during our video session today. She asked me which list felt more true to who I am. I started crying because I couldn't answer. Both feel true. Both feel impossible. Subscribe if you're still here, because I'm getting to the part where everything falls apart even more. 2 days ago, Emma showed up at my hotel. I don't know how she found me, but there she was, standing in the hallway when I opened my door. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, and the look on her face told me she knew. Not everything, maybe, but enough. We sat in my hotel room, and she asked me directly, "Are you having an affair?" I could have lied. Part of me wanted to protect her from this ugliness, but I'm tired of lying, tired of protecting everyone from the truth at the expense of myself. "I've met someone," I said carefully. "It's complicated, and I'm trying to figure out what to do about it." Emma looked at me like I was a stranger, like she'd never really known me at all. "How could you do this to Dad?" she asked, her voice sharp with judgment. "After everything you've built together? He's devastated, Mom. We all are." I wanted to explain to her that sometimes love isn't enough when you've lost yourself completely in the process, that her father and I had been slowly dying for years, long before Marcus came into the picture. But how do you explain that to your daughter without sounding like you're making excuses? "I know you're angry," I said, "and you have every right to be. But Emma, I need you to understand something. I've spent 38 years being the person everyone needed me to be, and I woke up one day and realized I don't know who I am anymore. That terrifies me more than losing your approval." She left without saying goodbye, and I haven't heard from her since. That was 2 days ago, and the silence is devastating. But it's also clarifying, because I'm learning that no matter what I choose, someone is going to be hurt. The only question is whether I'm willing to hurt myself to protect everyone else, the way I've been doing for decades. Marcus called tonight. He said he's been thinking about the pressure I'm under, and he doesn't want to be another thing I have to manage. "If you decide to stay with Richard, I'll understand," he said. "I don't like it, but I'll understand. I just want you to be happy, Eleanor, even if that means I'm not part of your life." His willingness to let me go made me love him more, which feels like the cruelest irony. Because Richard is fighting to keep me out of fear and obligation, while Marcus is willing to release me out of love. And I don't know which one I need more. Please subscribe and comment below. Should I choose safety or passion? Obligation or authenticity? The life I've built or the life I might still have time to live? The biopsy is tomorrow. I'll drive back to Sacramento tonight, sleep in the guest room of my own house like a stranger, and face whatever the doctor tells me in the morning. Richard has offered to come with me to the appointment, and I said yes because I'm scared, and because despite everything, he's still the person who's been by my side for most of my adult life. But here's what's keeping me up at night. What if the biopsy shows cancer, and I decide to stay with Richard out of fear and convenience, and then I survive? What if I get 5 more years, 10 more years, and I spend them right back in the half-life I was living before? Will I look back at this moment and hate myself for choosing safety over truth? Or what if I leave Richard, choose Marcus, blow up my entire life, and then the cancer is real and aggressive, and I spend my final months or years knowing I destroyed my family for nothing? That I hurt everyone I love for a few months of feeling alive? There's no good answer. That's what I've finally accepted. Whatever I choose, I will lose something precious. The only question is what I'm willing to live without, and what will destroy me faster. The regret of staying or the guilt of leaving. I've been writing letters I'll probably never send. One to Richard, trying to explain everything I couldn't say in our 38 years together. One to Marcus, thanking him for waking me up, even though it might have been kinder to let me sleep. One to each of my children, trying to help them understand that their mother is human, flawed, and still learning who she is even at 63. One to my mother, who died before I could ask her if she had regrets, if she ever wanted to run, if she ever felt trapped in the life she'd chosen. If you've made it this far, please hit subscribe. I need to know someone is bearing witness to this mess I've made. Tomorrow, after the biopsy, I'll have some answers. Not about my marriage or Marcus or what I should do with the rest of my life. But at least I'll know about my health, and maybe that will make the other decisions clearer. Or maybe it will just add another layer of impossible complexity to a situation that already feels unsolvable. Richard is downstairs right now. I can hear him moving around in the kitchen, probably making tea because he can't sleep either. Part of me wants to go down there, to try one more time to explain what I'm feeling. But I'm afraid that if I do, I'll see the hope in his eyes and I'll make promises I can't keep just to stop his pain. And I've done that enough already. Marcus sent me a text an hour ago. Whatever happens tomorrow, you're not alone. I haven't responded because I don't know what to say. Because the truth is, I am alone in this decision. No one can make it for me, and no one can protect me from the consequences. This is mine to carry, and it's the heaviest thing I've ever held. So here I am at 63 years old, sitting in my hotel room one last night before I have to face my real life again. And I still don't know what I'm going to do. Stay with Richard and try to rebuild what we've lost? Leave him and take a chance on something new with Marcus? Walk away from both of them and try to figure out who Eleanor is on her own? All I know is that I'm tired of being invisible. Tired of being convenient. Tired of making myself small so everyone else can be comfortable. Marcus saw me when I'd forgotten I was worth seeing, and I can't unknow that now. But that doesn't mean I know what to do with it. The sun is starting to come up. In a few hours, I'll drive to the hospital and find out if my body is betraying me the way I've betrayed everyone else. And after that, I'll have to decide what kind of woman I want to be for whatever time I have left. So I'm asking you, whoever you are watching this, what would you do? If you were 63 and had just woken up to find you'd been living someone else's life, would you go back to sleep? Or would you choose yourself, even knowing the cost? Comment below and let me know, because I honestly don't know anymore. And maybe your answer will help me find mine. Subscribe to this channel for updates on what I decide. Because I promise you, whatever happens next, it's going to change everything. The biopsy results, my marriage, Marcus, my children, my entire sense of who I am, it's all hanging in the balance. And I'm terrified. But I'm also, for the first time in decades, completely awake. What would you do in my place? Tell me. Please. Because I need to know I'm not the only one who's ever felt this lost. This torn, this terrified of both staying and going. Help me figure out how to be myself without destroying everyone I love in the process. Or tell me if that's even possible. The choice is mine to make. But I don't have to make it alone.